they filmed me, and MTV did a whole thing about internet dating, and I was like one of the things, and I was the only one on there who like didn't give. It's like hilarious and like breaking stuff, and I was acting like someone on a reality show now normally acts. I was doing it before it was a big deal, and so then that kind of blew up, and then my site just blew up. And so like then they all came back and they were like, oh, you know, like you're big and important and famous and funny now. Although I was like, you know, internet famous, which in 2002, now there's no difference between internet famous and famous, right? They're the same thing. In 2002, there was actually a thing, internet famous, where you could be super well known to like 100,000 people and no one else could know who you are.
Tucker, dude, it's great to have you here on the show. Thanks for making time. This is great.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
I'm sure you've heard this from a million people, but I read, I became acclimated to you through I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell.
Yeah.
And I read that book when I was on vacation with my wife, who's no longer my wife. I was like, this guy has lived life.
I was trying, man.
You were. Yeah. That's all we're all trying to do. So did you always want to be an author, or was that just something you stumbled into?
Totally stumbled into. I thought writers were bitches. Like I totally do. And of course that's what I am now. But no, I had no desire, no goal, didn't train for it, didn't go to school for it, nothing. No.
So how did it happen?
I went to law school, got fired from being a lawyer in 3 weeks. That story's in my first book.
Yeah.
And then went to work for my dad. He fired me within 6 months. And I think that story's in my second book. And then had no idea what to do. And so I was living in South Florida at the time, which I hated. And I was writing emails to my friends, and they thought they were hilarious. And you got to remember, this is like 2003. This is back when email forwards were a thing. And so they started forwarding those emails I was writing them to other people. And like they blew up. Like I started getting my emails forwarded back to me from friends in other social groups. And they'd be like, have you read this? This is so funny. And I'm like, jackass, scroll down, look at the first header. That's me. I wrote that. And like, oh, it makes sense. Sounded like you. And so then I was like, okay, I've got something here. Like I knew that, and my friends were like, yeah, dude, this is the only thing you're good at. You're not good at law or business.
Oh my God.
But writing funny stories is kind of your thing. So that's how I started.
And what happened? Did somebody approach you and be like, you should put this in a book? Did you hire a book agent?
No, it's way worse. It's way worse than that.
Yeah, tell us. I want to know.
So this is 2002, right? So this is really before MySpace. The internet definitely existed, but it was still tiny. I mean, the internet, there were like 40 million people on the internet, right? It was like people who went to college and people who worked at big companies, basically, some young people, and that was it. And so there was this huge book at the time. I forget what it's called, but it had the name and address and contact info for every book publisher in the country and every agent in the country. And I sent out, had to have been 500, I think closer to 1,000 query letters, right? Where I like kind of, you do your cover letter and it's like my top 5 stories, right? And when I say I had 100% rejection, I'm not exaggerating. 90+% I got no response from. And then probably more, 95. Like I got 50, form rejection letters. Thank you for your inquiry at this time, blah, blah, blah. But there were like 4 or 5 people who took time to write like personalized rejection letters. Like, this is the worst thing I've ever read. You should never write an email again.
Like you're a horrible person.
Like just like all of that. Like, this is the worst, right? And it's so funny. Like people ask me all the time, like, didn't that discourage you? I was like, no, because at this point I had already seen my stuff blow up. So I knew it was good. And I knew those people were wrong. And I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. They just have some hair up their ass, some prude, whatever. And so like at that point I was like, I didn't know what to do. And so I just put everything up on the internet for free. And and I had to use GeoCities. You remember like GeoCities?
Yeah.
Thing,
oh my
right?
God, yeah.
And put it all up on GeoCities, and it blew up. And then like MTV came to film me. Like I had a date application page. Like it was a total joke. It was like, what are we gonna do on our first date? Go to a gun range and shoot at strippers, or like just nonsense, complete nonsense, right? but like girls would fill it out and like hang out with me. And it was, which I thought was like the coolest thing of all time. But this is back when meeting people on the internet was super creepy, right? Like no one met anyone off the internet because
there was no
on the
Tinder.
Was a weirdo.
Yeah.
Tinder, Match.com didn't even exist, right? Nothing existed then. So then they filmed me, and MTV did a whole thing about internet dating. And I was like one of the things, and I was the only one on there who like didn't give a fuck and was like hilarious and like breaking stuff. And I was acting like someone on a reality show now normally acts. I was doing it before it was a big deal. Yeah. And so then that kind of blew up. And then my site just blew up. And so like, then they all came back and they were like, oh, you know, like you're big and important and famous and funny now. Although I was like, you know, internet famous, which in 2002, now there's no difference between internet famous and famous, right? They're the same thing. In 2002, there was actually a thing, internet famous, where you could be super well known to like 100,000 people and no one else could know who you are, you know?
Right.
Like now, if you're big on YouTube, you're big, you know, like if you're Jake Paul, you have 100 million fans. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Wasn't like that at the time. So I got really big, and then they did my first book. And because I had like an email capture on my site literally looked like Tumblr. Like I had spent all this, and everyone made fun of it because it was just like text. And now it's like, that's what everyone does. But I had an email capture. And so I had like 50,000 people waiting for my stuff. Book comes out and then it hit New York Times bestseller list. And with no media, none, zero so anything about it. But because, you know, and this is again, back when the only people who understood email at the time were like, the old school email direct response people like, you know, Brian Kurtz and Frank Kern and like the you know, Bill Glazer or whatever, those people, those are the only ones who understood. Now everyone gets it, but and I get by accident. It's not like I was a marketer. It like was on the site. It was a thing you could put on your GeoCities thing. So I put it on.
It's like, it reminds me, I don't even know how I found out about your book. It was probably like on some bestseller list, and I read like the description. I was like, I'm totally going to read this like during vacation. I remember I was on vacation in Southern California. Yeah. And like, my wife at the time, she's like, what are you reading? I'm like, I can't tell you. So much, yeah. I was like, literally like not like talking to her. Cause I was just like, did he really like open up someone's toilet and upper deck it? Yeah, I was like, okay, all right.
I haven't thought about that in years.
Yeah, there you go. I'm happy to serve. Okay, so all this happens. You get the book done. This thing blows up. Did you take it seriously after that, or were you just like, I cannot believe this crap's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I as soon as I realized I was a good writer and people liked it, then I took it. I took it actually seriously even before then, because what I was doing is making my friends laugh. My goal wasn't ever to be a writer, which is like, I have a company now that helps people write, publish, and market their books. And we teach people, we have coaching workshops and seminars and all this stuff. And what I teach people is, don't try and be a writer. Try and serve your audience. And I never once at any point tried to be a fancy writer. I started off trying to make my friends laugh in email. And because of that, I sold 4 million copies of a book and became huge. The book you're talking about spent 5 years on the bestseller list and was in every airport. There were multiple year periods where I couldn't travel without hearing people crack up laughing on an airplane because they were reading my book.
And they didn't even know you were there. Yeah.
No idea. Because like, even though I'm on the cover, I was never like face famous, you know, like
right.
I could, even at the height of my fame, like in 2009 when my movie came out, the movie about my book came out, like I could still go to Whole Foods and it was only like 2 or 3 people who would recognize me. And then they would like do it in passing, you know, like sort of like the way that you would like if you see like a B-list actor in a like a grocery store, you're like, that's that guy from that movie. And you can't remember his name, right? But you totally know that guy, you know, right? So I was like that at the peak. That's how famous. Yeah. But of course, then half my fans were idiots. So I'd be in like a grocery store. No, seriously. And like some 20-year-old dude be like, dude, Tucker Max, I love you. I was like, yeah, thank you. And he's like, and then he kind of look at me. He's like, why aren't you like drunk, screaming curses at people, like laying on a table, under a table? And I'm like, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday
we're on
in a grocery store, you fucking moron. He's like, well, so you're Tucker Max. I'm like, you're just an idiot.
Yeah, they just think that's your life 24/7.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Oh, well, I read these stories about where he's drunk and hooking up and acting like a fool, so that must be the only way he is. And I remember this one dude was doing that. He's like, but and I looked at him. I like, do you think if you met Michael Jordan right now, he'd have on Air Jordans dribbling a basketball in his Bulls uniform? And he kind of looked at me like,
it's like, I never thought of it that way.
he's like, oh yeah, right. It's like, okay, there you go.
So you start out, and this, I mean, it's awesome what happened with you, by the way. Like that is really cool. And I remember hearing about Andy Weir, who wrote that book, The Martian.
The Martian, yeah.
Very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he blogged
it was a novel,
chapters.
But yeah, he blogged his shit and had his audience, and it's a great book. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so, we see these like amazing stories like yours, his, other folks. And now it just feels like everybody like wants to write a book, and now we're like, it becomes formulaic, not books, but hey, write a book so that you can go speak and you can go coach and make money and blah, blah, blah. Right. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be a market for that. Where do you see the market going for that though? Like, is it just like, I love what you said, just writing books. Is that still something people should pursue? Is that, I know you're going to say yes, but how do you see that?
So I don't even think we've barely gotten started.
Really? Okay.
I think we're at the very beginning. Do you remember, you're old enough. You're in your 40s, you're like me. Yep. You got to be right. Okay.
Yep.
So don't you remember in like 06, 07, 08, especially in that crash, not the first .com. Mm-hmm. I remember people said in the first .com, but really in the second crash, people were like, the internet's already, it is what it is. Everything was overvalued, blah, blah.
Yep.
And you could have, the first .com crash, you could have bought Amazon at like $30. Mm-hmm. The second you could have you could have bought it at like 140, and now it's 2,400. Mm-hmm. Right? Just pre-COVID, the internet retail had finally broken like 15%. Like online sales had broken 15% of total retail. Right. And I think the numbers are way skewed now because of quarantine and a lot of other things. Right.
Wait, so it was only 15% pre-COVID?
15%.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that was a big deal that it had broken 15%.
Wow. Okay.
So like, I still tell people we're still at the beginning.
Huh.
Like we're past the pioneer stage. We're past the early adopter phase, but we're still at the beginning. Right. And that's just like tech and whatever. I think we are at the very beginning of books. I think we're going to see a period in our lifetime, and a lot of it's going to be because of what I do and my company does, where just about everyone writes a book. And now, most people will not be writing sort of like businessy type books for their coaching, because very few people do that. Like that's going to be a tiny section. But everyone wants to tell their story. Mm-hmm. Everyone. And everyone feels like they have a story to tell, and everyone wants to tell it. And I think that is going to be, that's one of the big things we're working on now. We started in the sort of nonfiction business thing, but what we're realizing, and I knew we would get there, is that's the beachhead of the market. Mm-hmm. Like Under Armour started with the shirt that goes under your football pads, and then they became massive, right? They hit everything else. Well, that like, entrepreneurs and business owners and coaches writing books to help them with sales or whatever was the beachhead. But I think everyone's going to tell their story in a book, because it is, I can't think of any other way. It is an ultimate form of creativity, of sharing, of proving you lived, all that kind of stuff. So no, dude, I think we're at the very beginning of it.
I mean, haven't people basically written a book? If you were to compile already, like if you were to compile everything that a given person has pasted on Facebook or on Instagram, and you just found a quick way to, okay, but I mean by like a story, like there's like content, right? And you export it.
But that's all bullshit. Like, okay. Seriously, you export, even let's take someone who takes a lot of time on Facebook and, writes those long ass books. You export all that, no one's going to read that book. It's bullshit. Because the medium totally determines the message. And so, like, I think what people are going to write are memoirs, right?
Okay,
because everyone wants to tell their story, right? Facebook posts aren't about telling their story. A lot of the marketers, I remember the time I was broke and this and that. That's just a technique they use to sell bullshit. But what most people really want to do is they want to connect with their truth, and they want to speak that truth and share it with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone has really truly recognized that and dove into it and created a process around it where people are able to do what we've just started. We just launched a memoir course and a memoir workshop, and it's crazy how well it's done. And I think we're barely into the first inning of that. I think it's a massive thing. I think it's a great way to determine what the future is ask yourself, what are rich people doing in their spare time now? Right? And I think rich people were writing books in their spare time 10 years ago. Now it's become, so it goes from like the high class, call it the aristocracy for lack of a better term, or elites is the term. It goes from elites to the merchant class, which are like entrepreneurs, business people, to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so right now books are finally really hitting their stride in the merchant class. And next is everybody. That's the way it works.
Interesting. Okay. So you guys have just started this memoir thing. Now I'm in marketing, right? But I work with a lot of people who are trying to grow a personal brand or whatnot. And so the first thing everyone says is, I want to tell my story. Like, I want to tell my story. And then, I'm like, well, your story is not a business in of itself. Like, what do you want to sell? Well, I want to sell my story. Right. And I'm like,
but hold on, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm not talking about everyone's going to want to write a book to sell their story and or they want to write a book for a personal brand. I'm not talking about that. You're in marketing. People you work with want that because that's an ego thing for them or a business thing for them. Okay. Like I want to be famous, or I want to build a lifestyle business, or I want to build a business around my brand, or what. I'm not talking about that. I consider that the merchant class, right? The entrepreneurial class, the business owner class. Like that's, and for most people, building a business around their personal brand is actually a terrible decision. I'm with you on that. I'm talking about like someone who's like, I just want my kids and my family and my friends to know who I am and where I came from.
And they don't want to sell it at all. You don't think they're going to want to sell that, or maybe, but they just want to have that.
What we always tell people, and we are so clear about this, expect to sell no copies. None. Right? Now, we say, listen, it's entirely possible you could. It's entirely, and a lot of what, like, because we always tell them, write the book for you, edit for your reader. Right? Okay. So you write the book to understand yourself and to really see who you are and to really unpack that. It's therapy, basically. And then if you decide to publish, because we tell people you can just publish it, like, and we'll help them do it. You can publish like 50 copies or 100 copies and just you and your friends have it and no one else, and that's it. Cool. But if you want to put it out to the world, then again, expect to sell no copies, but edit for the reader. And so who are the people that like basically are where you used to be? How can this help them? And so then you got to go through and take your 100,000 words of vomit and cut it down to 60,000 words that is like really resonant and really honest. And it doesn't have to be very prescriptive. You don't have to tell people what to do. You just have to tell people what you did and do it in a really honest and direct and authentic and raw way. And then it's like, if you were a Hispanic dude who came from the barrio of San Antonio and grew to become a big entrepreneur and you want to tell your story, cool. That can help a ton of kids who came from where you came from, but you got to be honest about it and you got to tell. And so we kind of walk people through that. And then those people, if they listen, if they make the book really honest and authentic and raw, they usually end up reaching an audience. And, they might sell a few thousand copies, 5,000, 10,000 copies over 5 years is fantastic. But even the ones who do sell a lot end up not caring that much about how much they sell. They think it's cool. What they really like is the impact it has. Right? Like I'm thinking of a specific guy, Lorenzo Gomez, who's written 2 books with us, 2 different memoirs, one about grade school, one about high school. And he's a Hispanic kid, grew up in poor ass parts of San Antonio, and then helped build Rackspace, which is this huge company, and is doing all kinds of cool stuff now. The thing he likes the most, man, is he goes to like grade schools and high schools around San Antonio and talks to kids who were just like him. And he's like, I was you. I sat where you sat. I ate what you ate. I had, my TO was just like your TO, blah, 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 blah. And look who I am now. And they love it and they eat it up and it's amazing. And he has like all these kids he's helped, And so like, but we always tell people the only way you're going to help someone else is if you are open and honest and authentic about who you are and what you are and what struggles you overcame. That's the only way. You can't help 1,000 people until you can help one person. And the way you help one person is by sharing who you are.
That's really good. When you look back on, especially your early books, right? Did you feel that way, like when you were writing those as well, where you were like, I'm gonna write like for it to help people or impact, or was it just you like learning to express?
It was just
yourself?
My fratire stuff was all about making my friends laugh. That was it.
Okay.
That was it. It was entertainment. And now, granted, there's life lessons and stuff in there, and I've had so many people, especially dudes, but a lot of women too, tell me how much my books helped them. But if I had tried to write my books to help people, they would have been preachy. They would have been bad, right? The best way for most people to help other people is to share who they are. Because no one reads your memoir to learn about you. They read your memoir to learn about themselves. And the way that they're going to learn about themselves is if you reflect part of them back on them, right? Like, I'll give you a great example. One of the most impactful books I've ever read in my life was written by a 13-year-old Jewish girl who grew up in fucking Amsterdam, a Dutch Jewish teenager. And you know who I'm talking about, Anne Frank.
Yeah, I've been to her house. Yeah, I went
right.
a couple years ago. Yeah, it's
but
crazy.
I can't believe that it was written by a little girl, but in a way, but in another way, it's like, oh, I totally get it, because that's the only person who's really going to act and think she might die, because she's like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to tell the truth. That's it. I'm just going to tell the truth, and that's it. And I don't care. And I had nothing in common with this girl, except all my humanity. Every aspect of my humanity is the same as hers, and she revealed hers in a way that allowed me to get in touch with mine.
Have you ever been to the house, the Anne Frank house?
Oh, dude, it's breathtaking.
I couldn't. Yeah, I remember just standing there, like no one could say anything.
Right.
And I was
what
like,
do you say?
It's like, I mean, it's kind of making my skin crawl right now, like thinking about it. And I'm like, this little room for like
the whole family,
for years. Yeah. I'm like, you can't make a sound. Like, these walls are really thin. The street is right there. I was shocked. Like when I was there, and then, people are complaining about quarantine right now, but, but all that to say, like, that's a really, really good example. It's a really powerful example of that. 'Cause I was like, that's just a runt of a kid, the 13-year-old kid. Holy cow. Like, damn. Okay. That's really good. I didn't think it'd go there, but that was really good. Share a little bit real quick, about what Scribe does and how you guys work with people. Because I think this is fascinating. I think it's really cool. I love the idea of a Scribe. I wish I had known about you guys way earlier.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Yeah, it's funny.
So far away.
So basically, I was at an entrepreneurial event five and a half years ago, and this woman was like asking me, she's like, people have been asking me to write a book for years. I have a family. I've got this big company. I can't sit down and do this. It's just too complicated. I can't figure it out. How do I get this book out of my head without having to do all this? And I look at her. I'm like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yeah, kind of. And so then, of course, being at that point, I was in my peak snobby elitist writer mentality. And I was like, I think I quoted her like the Mark Cuban quote, like, everyone wants to be a star, but no one wants to do the work. And then I just started telling her how to like be a writer and criticizing her, basically shaming her, but like subtly. And she rolls her eyes at me and she's like, Tucker, are you an entrepreneur? I'm like, yeah, of course. She's like, I don't think so. Because a real entrepreneur would help me solve my problem and not lecture me about hard work. And I was like, fuck, like, because she was totally right. She was so right. I was mortified, embarrassed. Like, it was one of those things where I couldn't say anything because I was like, I had to like go bathroom or something. But then I got obsessed with this idea. How do I get a book out of her head without her having to learn how to be a writer? And so like it took me like a few months, but I'm like, oh my God, this problem has been solved for 2,000 years. They're called scribes. There's people whose entire job it is to take people's ideas and put them into a book in a way that with complete fidelity, right? And we think, but everyone's like, oh yeah, that's called ghostwriting. Bullshit. Ghostwriting is where you write a book for someone and it's your ideas and then they pay you to put your name on it. And somehow we lost the thread of scribing. So I wrote down everything on my whiteboard, everything that you have to do to write a book. And I realized I only need her for about a third of it. It's a very important third, but it's only about a third. So I call her up, I give her the idea. She's like, okay, yeah, cool, let's try it. And then I name a price. Like, I don't really care. It's just enough to make sure that like she has skin in the game and make it worth my time. Because at the time, I wasn't really doing anything. I'd sold millions of books. What do I need to do, right? And so like I was just embarrassed, and I had to like get this shame out of me, and I was going to do it by helping her. And so the process worked. I wasn't even sure it was going to work, but it worked. And I just interviewed her, and I got everything out of her head. It was all her ideas, her words, her voice. And I interviewed her in a way where like I didn't have to do the research. I could basically just write it off of her. You can't just take a transcript because you're a podcaster. So I'm sure you've seen transcripts of your podcast. You're like, oh, that podcast was fire. And then you read the transcript. You're like, I'm a retard. Like, yeah, right. But then you listen again. You're like, no, it was fire. I don't understand. This is so crazy to me. So you can't like, there's a lot of work to kind of take even brilliant spoken language and make it work on the page. But it's not that hard once you kind of figure out the process. And it did. It worked great. And so I know how to publish a book. So I kind of went through the whole process, found a cover designer, blah, blah. And I had a publishing company actually at the time. And so it worked great. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to send my friends to you. And I'm like, why? This is how stupid I am. Like, why would you do that? And she's like, because they want books too. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do this again. I've cleansed myself of my embarrassment. Right. And she's like, okay, well, I'm still going to send them. So what do you want? What price do you want me to tell them? And so like, she did. And I was like, I had a guy who was doing other work for me at the time, who's a decent writer. I'm like, do you want to take these books and do them? And we'll just split the money. He's like, oh, hell yeah. And so then after a couple of months, he's like, dude, we've done about $250,000 of business. I think this might be a company. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And so that was like 5.5 years ago. And then, we had to hire a professional CEO and all that stuff. But now we're close to 2,000 books and done some huge ones like David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. And, we got 50 full-time and 170 part-time. And we're like a real company now.
Yeah. Dude, congrats. That's amazing. I got my start in marketing through copywriting.
Yeah.
And I was hired. I did scribe work, basically. Yeah. People would have called it a ghostwriter. I was like, no, I wasn't. Or they would have called me a developmental editor or something like that. I was like, yeah, I did a little bit of that. I added it, and it became a bestseller in the business space. He's a marketing guy and all that stuff. It was cool, but I was like you. I was like, I never want to do this for anybody again.
No.
And what happened was after that, I was like, I don't want to do this for myself. I don't even want to do this for myself. My writing muscle has become so atrophied in the last couple of years because all I started doing was like going with the trends with media. So I've been podcasting for 5-6 years, do a lot of speaking, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, can't someone do what I do for what I did for that guy for me? And yeah, I didn't know about you guys. That sucked. Yeah. I would have been. So I'm wrapping that thing up now, but yeah, next time through, and I'm saying this, I said yes to this because I was like, I meet so many people who have great ideas. They're not writers. I love what you say on your site. The 2 questions, like, do you actually want to type?
Yeah.
And number 2, do you have time? And I just thought that was because that's perfect.
Because we have 2 programs. If you want to write it yourself, like your hands on the keyboard, no problem. We have we'll teach you the process. So, pair editors with you, weekly calls, all that sort of stuff. So either you can be coached along the way, or we just interview you and get it out of you. Easy.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, dude. Thanks for coming on. This was great. Congrats on all the success. I'm gonna go back and reread all your stuff now. I don't know why. I'm gonna relive our 20s or something. What's kind of next for you? Is that what else is what are you most excited about next?
The memoir thing right now, because that's kind
fascinating.
That's where we were maybe about 6 months in. What I've realized, man, is that market's at least 10 times bigger, maybe 100 times bigger, because like there's, out of, let's call it 350 million people in America, there might be 3 million people, business type people, who want to write books, but all the rest of those people want to write books, so like, I think it might be 100 times bigger. And you can't approach a memoir or telling your story the way you approach a nonfiction book. They're totally different. And what's exciting for me is this is how I got my start, was telling my story, right? And so like this is much more home for me. And so figuring out a process for this, because here's the thing, like, it's so easy. I could do it in 30 minutes, teach you the mechanical steps of writing a memoir. It's really easy. It's 3 questions, 2 questions. What happened? What did I feel or think about it? What did I do next? Like, that's basic. You just keep following that algorithm and you got it, right?
Yeah.
But that's no, it's way deeper, man. It's basically therapy. So how do you become self-aware? How do you actually understand your life? What questions do you need to ask? How do you unpack all that stuff? So I've really had to like integrate my therapeutic practice and talk to all kinds of other people who are amazing at getting people to open up and all that, and put it together to create sort of a process that both gets people open, but then also enables them to write about it. So that's, it's still kind of small. We haven't really pushed it out there yet because it's not ready, but it will be in about 6 months to a year. It'll be ready. You'll come
back and we'll talk about it.
Awesome.
I'm starting to think that through, because like, if you gave me a choice dead on right here and now, hey, you can drop, whatever the price is, 20, 30 grand, whatever. But like, I can gift that to like my mom or my stepdad, who is a really bright, intelligent, drinks every day Irish guy.
Yeah.
Right. And just has stories every time, but he's 84.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would love to have a book. I'd be like, Charles, just work with this process. Give us this gift so that you can live on forever. Like, I think I would sign up for that. I would gift that to him. I would spend the money just for the family.
Yeah,
like,
no, I'm with you, dude.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
That's
we're close.
Cool. All right, brother. Thank you so much for coming
on.
This is amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.